Welcome back. All right, so there's been a lot of talk over the last few days about Stamkos exiting Tampa and Marchessault exiting Vegas. And the perception that, hey, these teams didn't do enough to try to hold on to these players. What are they doing? And so with Tampa, the writing's on the wall, of course, as soon as they acquire the rights to Jake Guentzel and they get him signed. Guentzel being younger than Stamkos, and then that begs the question of, so was that the right move or not? And a lot of emotional feelings out there. Part of it, I think, is the emotional attachment of Stamkos and the Tampa Bay fan base, and that's a very mutual relationship there. And players do get attached to being in certain cities. And I've talked about this in videos dating back, I think it's 5 or 6 years. The first time that I talked about, and I remember this was with Chicago Blackhawks, that the Hawks had looked like were falling out of contention for the Cup. And I suggested at the time, what if they decided to move Jonathan Toews? What if they decided to get younger and decided to get a little bit, cheaper on the contracts? And there were a lot of people that said, hey, you can't do that. You can't trade Toews. Toews isn't going anywhere. That's a terrible idea. And I understood the sentiment at the time, but I remember way back when the Sedins signed their last contract in Vancouver. And at the time thinking, I love the Sedins. I love what Henrik and Daniel have done for the city. But, I mean, that's 14, I think it was 14 million in cap. And I thought, what could they have done with that 14 million in cap if they'd gone with, say, 4 other players or younger players and on a cheaper cap hit, what might they have been able to do? But again, there's that loyalty, right? And it feels like that might be starting to erode just a little bit because now we're hearing, well, maybe Crosby doesn't want to finish his career as a Penguin either. Maybe he's looking at what's going on in Pittsburgh and says, you know what? I'm okay with going somewhere else. And again, that's something that would have been unheard of not that long ago, but it makes some sense. Now, I do think that Vegas, when they come into the league and the way they've run the team, may very well have shown other general managers loyalty's great and everything, but winning is a lot of fun. And sometimes you have to weigh the two. Sometimes loyalty can hold you back from winning, right? So we look back to June of 2017, and before Vegas has even done the expansion draft, they've made numerous trades with the expansion draft in mind. Coming out of the expansion draft, no one expected Vegas to be good. I'm telling you, no one did. You go back to those videos back during the Vegas expansion, and most of the comments were about, oh, this is a terrible team. I can't believe this is a real thing. And Fleury's over the hill, yada, yada, yada. And then they had a great run. But June of 2017, they negotiated various trades for expansion protections, ruthlessly too. They get Marchessault in the expansion draft from Florida, and Florida, as a thank you, also trade them Riley Smith. So there's that. Now, they wanted out from underneath Marchessault's contract. In hindsight, may not have been a great move for Florida. Shea Theodore is acquired from Anaheim. Alex Tuch from Minnesota. And then there's various draft picks that they would use and trade those draft picks for other pieces of the lineup as well. George McPhee went into that expansion draft with his 4 lines, 6 defensemen, and his goaltending tandem in mind. He had everybody written out. And so that's part of the reason why Vegas did so well. He was planning this like, here's my team, here's what it's going to look like. And made a lot of trades with teams that turned out to be absolute steals. Now, February 26th of 2018, well, they're unlikely playoff team, an unlikely playoff team, but they're there. They gave up a first, a second, and a third for Thomas Tatar. What Vegas was doing here is something that's virtually unheard of, that it's an expansion team, and I understand they were, at the top of the division and everything, but the idea of an expansion team giving up draft picks for a player, it's risky, right? Because this is their first year. They don't have the depth that other organizations have. What are you doing? Well, then Tatar doesn't work out, right? So Vegas goes all the way to the Stanley Cup final in 2018, but Tatar has very little to do with it. And it's pretty clear that Tatar's time in Vegas isn't going to be that long. Vegas, to their credit, they understand they lost that trade with Detroit, the Tatar one. They're okay with losing another trade to move Tatar out because he doesn't fit in with the rest of what they're trying to put together here. So September 10th of 2018, they make another trade that essentially they lose, where they trade Tatar, Suzuki, and a 2019 second in exchange for Max Pacioretty. But they're okay with losing that deal because they got depth down the middle. They don't see a spot for Suzuki on the lineup at the time. At least that's how it looks looking back now. Tatar had to go. 2019 second. Yeah, you'll make that trade. And Pacioretty's a 30-goal scorer. He's a veteran. He's a very good player. So at the time, it's a smart move picking up Pacioretty, even though, yeah, losing Suzuki hurts, but they had to trade Tatar. He just couldn't stay. February 25th of 2019, they acquire Mark Stone in a deal that to this day I would think Ottawa likely regrets. Although they did get Brandstrom, who was seen as a really good prospect at the time, it has not worked out for Brandstrom at the NHL level. And yesterday he signs with the Colorado Avalanche, of course. But for Mark Stone, it just works in Vegas. Now he's their captain, and right out of the gate, he's fantastic. He was very good in Ottawa too, but of course Ottawa didn't get the attention that Vegas was getting at the time. So all of a sudden, a lot of fans are finding out this guy's pretty good. December 3rd of 2019, they acquire Chandler Stevenson from Washington. They take advantage of teams that need to dump off players, and they pick guys up, not worrying about whether or not they have the cap space for them, because they'll just dump other guys off to make space for the other guys coming in. And that's kind of been the MO with Vegas since then, and really throughout their existence. February 19th of 2020, they acquire Alec Martinez. These are all key pieces of what will become a Stanley Cup champion in 2023. So Martinez, solid pickup, and again, they're giving up draft picks, they're giving up futures because they want to win now. July 27th of 2021, they enraged the hockey world. They enraged Vegas fans by dumping off Marc-Andre Fleury to Chicago. But they did the important thing. They won after that. They stayed competitive after that. And fans, as long as the winning keeps going, will usually forgive. They may not be happy with moves that get made, but they'll forgive. July 27th, they dumped him, and then November the 4th of that same year, they acquired Jack Eichel. So they got rid of Marc-Andre Fleury's contract because they needed that cap space. Some of that ends up going to Jack Eichel's contract. They also get a 2023 third in the Jack Eichel deal. Going the other way are Alex Tuch, Peyton Krebs, a 2022 first, which was used to draft Noah Ostlund, and a 2023 second round draft pick. So again, they're giving up futures. They're aware that over time this trade may end up favoring Buffalo. However, they get Jack Eichel. And Eichel, of course, helps them win a Stanley Cup in 2023. June 16th of 2022, they traded Dodonov for a second time. This time going to Montreal. This one sticks. The Dodonov trade, it ended up not looking great. Now, I understand that that was a miscommunication between Ottawa and Vegas when Vegas got him from Ottawa, where Ottawa said, yeah, he didn't submit his no trade list in time, so you could trade him wherever. They trade him to Anaheim. The trade gets undone because it's on his no trade list. It's kind of a mess. And then Dodonov is like a key guy for them down the stretch in 2022, and they trade him anyways. So even though Dodonov was their best goal scorer down the stretch in 2022, a year where they missed the playoffs, they still trade him. There's no variation in the plan. No matter how well you do or don't play with Vegas, it seems like the plan still stays in place. July 13th of 2022, they dump off Max Pacioretty to Carolina. So they traded a lot to get Pacioretty back in 2018. It does not stop them from dumping him in 2022. They're not worried about what Suzuki's doing in Montreal. They're not worried about how it's going to look. It's not their problem. August 29th of 2022, they acquire Adin Hill, a deal that nobody made a big deal over, and Adin Hill ends up being the goaltender that is the winning goaltender in the Stanley Cup final after Brossoit got hurt, which was after Thompson got hurt, and of course that's after Leonard had left the team. So they were down to their fourth-string goaltender, which was Adin Hill, and they won the Stanley Cup with him, so suddenly he's worth a bunch of money. June 28th of 2023, they dump Riley Smith off to Pittsburgh. Riley Smith was part of their best line. You had Smith, Marchessault, Karlsson. Absolutely fantastic line. And two of the three are gone. And how much longer will William Karlsson be there? We shall see. March 7th of 2024, they acquire Noah Hanifin. Part of the reason that Marchessault and Stevenson are both out is because they acquired Hanifin at the deadline and then immediately gave him an extension. Wasn't a rental. So the choice is made. Hanifin's a good young player. We're going to sign him long term. Stevenson and Marchessault, both older. And so if they go, they go. Vegas is trying to keep this where their key core guys are in that 24 to 29 age range, right? March 8th of the 2024, so a day after they acquire Hanifin, they acquire Hertl. Now, they had to use LTIR, and fans got mad about the LTIR thing, and, Stone's faking it, blah, 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 blah. But the reality is that Hertl, that contract, is also part of the reason why Stevenson and Marchessault are out. So when they acquire Hannafin and Hurdle and they re-sign Hannafin, suddenly you know that a lot of the guys that they'll be looking to keep aren't going to be able to stick around. But again, this has been Vegas's MO. They are fine with losing players in exchange for what they're going to be able to do later. And they seem to have an eye on the following season or what's going to happen the rest of that season. Now, so far in this free agent period, they've added Victor Olofsson on a very team-friendly contract. He comes over from a rough year in Buffalo, but hey, Olofsson might know that Eichel guy. And they add Samsonov in net. Well, they've already had reclamation projects in net, and they've done pretty well with them. There wasn't any hype around Logan Thompson initially when Vegas picks him up, and he ends up being pretty good. But he's one of the guys who's now out. Stevenson, Marchessault, Thompson, who had 1 year left on a very team-friendly contract, he goes to Washington. Martinez, Carrier, Amadio, and Mantha, who was a trade deadline acquisition that didn't work out. It didn't work out with Mantha. But that's the thing. Vegas has no problem with going up, so that didn't work. And they move on, and they adjust. The cap space they have, according to Cap Friendly, which is going to go dark in a couple of days here, $1,310,016 as long as they have Leonard on a LTIR. So they are not in a position where they can keep players. So for all of the discussion of Stevenson and Marshall and why didn't they try harder to keep him, my guess is they were looking at their lineup and going, we'll be okay without him. So we'll look at Vegas's lineup as it's likely to work out. And I'm using Cap Friendly's line projections. Again, they're going to go dark on the 5th, so I'll have to use something else, either daily face-off or whatever. It's fine. The projected top 6, so you got Barbashev, Eichel, and Stone. Those are 3 top 6 forwards. Dorofeev, Hurdle, and Holtz. I don't think that's going to end up being the top 6. I can't see Karlsson being outside the top 6, and I think Victor Olofsson can jump up into the top 6. But you have Olofsson, Karlsson, and Brisson shown as the third line, again on Cap Friendly. And then the fourth line of Howden, Roy, and Kolesar. One thing to keep in mind is this. Strength of a team down the middle is really, really important in today's NHL. You have Eichel, Hurdle, Karlsson, and Roy. That is one of the best top 4s you're going to find in the National Hockey League because Nick Roy should be a third-line center, and if he's your fourth-line center, you have an abundance of centers. And then on the blue line, you have Hannafin and Pietrangelo. There's been discussions of whether or not they might dump off Pietrangelo's contract at some point soon. I don't think they're going to do that. If they were going to do it, I think it would have happened already. If they do it, it'll probably be next summer because there'll be somebody else they want to pick up, right? One thing for Vegas, they have not been shy about picking up the player they want. So circling back to the Stamkos-Gensel situation, Tampa wanted Gensel. They're like, we've got to go and get Gensel. And sacrificing Stamkos, the captain, the identity of the team, well, we're going to have to do it. We're going to have to rip that Band-Aid off sooner or later. We'll do it this summer. Now, we don't know whether or not it's going to work. But if it does, we're likely going to see other teams that go, you know what, this is a guy in his 30s who's been a major part of this franchise for a long time. But we have to look at the long-term future here and not just this season. We need to look at the long term. And I think Vegas has been doing that in terms of staying a contender. Not looking at the long term in terms of acquiring draft picks and prospects, but just staying in contention. That's why you pick up Hannafin. That's why you pick up Hurdle. And that's why you're willing to lose Stevenson and Marchessault. You don't want to have a team full of guys in their mid-30s who are, starting to descend in terms of their production, and you're still paying them prime money, right? Now, their defense is rounded out by McNabb and Theodore. Well, somehow Braden McNabb's still here. Haig and White Cloud, third pairing, both homegrown talents there. And then in net, you have Hill and Samsonov. Now, a tandem of Hill and Samsonov, we'll see how that does. Because for Vegas, they've done an excellent job of knowing exactly who to pick up. One thing that Vegas taught me early on was just how important your pro scouts can be. From day one, they have found exactly what this team needs when it needs it, all the way through. And that's why when I start seeing posts of, well, Vegas is going to be awful, Vegas is going to suck next year, I don't think that's going to be the case. I also don't think this team is done. So this is the team, too, that if they get off to a slow start to the season, let's say they start the season 3-5-1, they will not be shy about making a trade. They will not be shy about dumping off players they feel like are not producing the way that they should. So the one thing Vegas, I think, has done all the way through is they do have players that have been here for a long time, but they're here for a long time because they're still productive, they're still doing really well, and their contracts are already, set. But they're not shy about giving up players that are in their early 30s even, because you don't want to give a long-term extension there necessarily if you can spend that money elsewhere. So are we now seeing an era coming into the game? Are we going to see this where more teams play hardball with free agents, star free agents, big names, and they're not shy about losing those big names? One other example I could use is John Tavares. When John Tavares left the New York Islanders, the expectation was that the Islanders weren't going to be very good the following season. They still made the playoffs. They were still fine. One thing with hockey, while there are instances where if you subtract one player from a team, it makes a huge difference, in general, it doesn't. So Vegas has shown that time and time again. Tampa Bay is going to try to show that in going from Stamkos to Gensel, who are two completely different players, obviously. But let me know your thoughts. How do you feel about this era that we're in right now where, yeah, star players in their early 30s might be on their way out? Something that we saw about 20 years ago. Guys in their mid-30s suddenly were switching teams where maybe they wouldn't have back in the 80s. But let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And so, yeah, do you think we're starting to see GMs, playing hardball with star players in a way they haven't before? Or are these just going to be outliers and it's going to stay relatively the same? So players in their early 30s looking for massive extensions for a lot of money, will still get them. Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.